Hello, friends and family. Over the Independence Day weekend, I asked our friend, Mr. J.C. Watts, if he would deliver a sermon and message to our congregation at Place for Life on that Sunday. Little did I know that Brother J.C. would deliver a word not just to Place for Life, but a word that is what I feel to this nation and to the church in this nation and at this hour. I hope that you have a few moments that you can take to set aside to receive and listen to this powerful message and this powerful word from Mr. J.C. Watts. I hope you enjoy.
Good morning, and I'm thrilled to be with you. Place for Life this morning, and I'm thrilled that your pastor, Dustin Hawkins, would think enough of me to extend an invitation for me to be with you this morning and to feed the flock. And I feel a kinship with the Place for Life because my pastor today here at Quest Church was once your pastor. And your pastor, Dustin Hawkins, over the last 18 to 24 months, I've gotten a chance to know him and spend some personal time with him. And I am thrilled that he would consider me a friend. Over the last 62 years of my life, I have had an opportunity to operate in several different arenas. I've obviously been a husband and a father. I've participated in athletics at a very high level. I've been a full-time youth minister. I've operated at a very high level in government and politics and also as a businessman. And this morning I'm combining all of that to bring you not necessarily a sermon, but to bring you a message combining all of that and taking the wisdom and experiences that I've had from those things and from those arenas and to share with you. Over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think more specifically over the last 4 or 5 months, as we've been sheltered at home, I hope that we've learned and we've gained wisdom from what we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 months. As we've been captured in our homes, watching television, watching the evening news, looking at our digital devices, and capturing news stories from around the world and from around the country, what has God said to us? Have we been sensitive enough to hear what God would have us hear as we've been sheltered at home? And there's two things that has really stood out with me, and that's these two things. One, God has spoken to my heart to say, remind America, don't waste your pain. Learn from what we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years, and again, more specifically over the last 4 or 5 months. And two, he has said to my heart, has spoken to my heart, and he said, we yet have work to do in perfecting our union. You know, I have studied leadership over the years, over the last 40 years, and being a quarterback, I've studied other quarterbacks, and I've watched film of other quarterbacks, and I've read things about men and women that's led our country, that's been a part of leading our nation and world leadership even over the last 35, 40 years of my life. And I have probably read everything that's been, or most things that's been written by or about Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, Reverend Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, world leaders, American leaders. I've read much about them to learn what made them successful, what made them be able to capture the moment. And we all we all experience these right now moments in our lives. And the men and women that's really moved our nation forward and captured the attention of the world, they were the men and women that in those right now moments, they did the right thing for the right reason at the right time in history. Abraham Lincoln led America with the idea that the great promises of the Declaration of Independence belong to all people for all time, not just for some men at one time in history. The idea that human freedom is an inalienable God-given right was a radical idea in 1863. Today in America, I believe we must be radical in our commitment to the idea that all people have talent, potential, and possibility. I believe in an America that has a fundamental belief in people, a belief in markets, and a belief in human potential. America must be a nation that believes in possibilities, not limits. We must believe in people, not elites. And we must believe in democracy, not bureaucracy. Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, said before his first inaugural, "I would rather be assassinated on this spot than give up my beliefs in the Declaration of Independence." He also said once, "I pledge my party and my life to the fact that all men are created equal." And I believe today that passion, that those beliefs must be our nation's moral foundation and at the very same time, a practical idea for human progress. Back in Abraham Lincoln's day, there was a political party called the Whig Party. And the Whig Party died. And do you know why it died? Because it stood for nothing. It couldn't decide if it was for slavery or against slavery. It collapsed. It had no heart, no soul, no guiding moral or political principles. And in so many ways, Mr. Lincoln had the courage to come along and pick up the banner on the profound ideas of freedom and emancipation. And people listened to Mr. Lincoln. They trusted Mr. Lincoln. He was so successful, and I'm convinced the reason Mr. Lincoln was successful and the reason so many people listened to him was they knew that he believed and people knew that he cared. And friends, that principle still stands true in 2020 America. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. How do we make America's mission statement, the Declaration of Independence, how do we make it real and how do we bring it alive for all Americans? I think there's a couple of things we have to consider. We have to consider this: character in our leadership, integrity in our leadership is extremely, extremely important. I don't care if it's a nation, if it's a church, if it's a business, and it's a home. Character in our leadership is important. And to think that we can have a strong America without leadership of character is the same as believing that you can get the water without the wet. America is a great nation, and I believe that we are mankind's best hope. I don't say that arrogantly. I say that because I believe that with great conviction. But we also understand this. In spite of how great America is, she cannot shake her fist in the face of a holy God and expect to get away with it. Thomas Jefferson said, I quote, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever," end quote. The real defense of our nation is not our military, although the military is important, but instead it's in the spiritual convictions, the character, the commitment, and the integrity of our citizenry and our leaders. And for those of us in the church, those of us for the place of life, for those of us who understand God's mission and God's calling upon our lives, we should understand the hope of America isn't in the White House. It isn't in the State House. It's not even in the schoolhouse. But it's in God's house, in God's people, at the Place for Life, at Quest Church. How do we make the Declaration of Independence real, and how do we make it come alive through our military? We adopt the philosophy of peace through strength. As I've studied world history and I've studied American history, people have threatened us from abroad since the inception of America, since the birth of America. And I adopted a philosophy a long time ago concerning our military, or the importance of our military. I adopted this philosophy. When evil people say they will do evil things to the United States of America, I believe them and I take them seriously. How do we make the Declaration of Independence come alive, and how do we make it real for all Americans? We take entrepreneurial opportunity and advance it into every pocket of poverty in America. From the Delta of Mississippi to the urban areas of Detroit, to the rural parts of Texas and Oklahoma and every other state. How do we make the Declaration of Independence real and make it come alive? We tear down the walls of prejudice and despair and dependency that keeps many people, especially poor people, from realizing their dreams and their aspirations. Over the last 60 years, in the rural and urban pockets of poverty, the incentives have been the reverse of everything that needs to be done to create productive human behavior and wealth. We should not penalize and discourage savings by welfare moms. We should not discourage investment in poor communities. We should encourage investment in poor communities. We should not penalize welfare moms for marrying the father of their children. We should do all we can to encourage fathers to be in all homes, in spite of what part of town they grew up in spite of the fact that someone may be on welfare. We should encourage dads to engage with their families and with their kids. The strength of our nation can't be measured in GNP alone. The ultimate strength of America is our people. The ultimate strength of America is our people. It's you, it's me, it's us, our hopes, our dreams, our ideas, our ambitions, our aspirations, and most importantly, our goodness. Let's make the Declaration of Independence come alive and be real by creating equality of education for all children. Place for life, you understand the value of education. And for me, it's the debate about school is really not charter schools or public schools or faith-based schools. Or really, the debate for me is what works. No child should be left behind because he or she comes from a broken home or a poor family or a tough neighborhood when it comes to education. If our kids can't read and write and do the arithmetic and get the necessary computer skills to compete in a global marketplace, then rather than costing us $9,000 to $12,000 to keep them in school on an annual basis, we'll have to pay about $28,000 to $30,000 to keep them in prison. Education is extremely important if we want the Declaration of Independence to come alive for all Americans. Some believe economically that the only way that you can help some is to take it from others. That economy is a giant zero-sum game, and that's not the American dream. We should want to build an America that will encourage. I want children, we want children in America and Texas and Oklahoma that exalts their boundless potential instead of imposing limits. We should want people treated as resources, not as a drain on resources. We should want children in the inner city to have the same opportunity to realize their dreams as children in the suburbs. And yes, we as Christians We understand the value of being intentional, to saying to all people that God loves you, that God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Intentionally going into urban areas, rural areas, poor areas, black community, white community, red, yellow, and brown communities. Being intentional in offering up God's vision and God's love concerning their future. I want to teach all American kids that any student with desire and discipline and faith and ambition and the will to work hard, that they can succeed. This is the process for progress. The process for progress. And I say to you, while we as people of faith, you at the Place for Life, us here at Quest Church, we can have our disagreements, but the unity of our efforts should not require unanimity. We don't all have to look alike or say it all the same way, but we must have a common foundation of character and a common goal of recapturing the American dream for all Americans. And yes, we will have our critics. I've had my critics. Place for Life, you've had your critics. Quest Church, we've had our critics. Just as Nehemiah had Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem who ridiculed him, but he never gave up. He never left the wall. He never quit. Abraham Lincoln said once, make sure your feet is in the right place and stand firm. I say, make sure your feet is in the right place and stand firm on God's word. Thomas Paine said this, I quote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly." End quote. We do have the potential in America, at the Place for Life, at Quest Church. We do have the potential to help our poor citizens move from poverty to prosperity. We do have the potential to build or rebuild our broken culture, to build better education. We are the nation that's gone from Stagecoach to 747. We've gone from encyclopedia and dictionaries to Google. We've gone from Pony Express to Federal Express. We have the potential, the Place for Life, to reach out to every American child, regardless of skin color, in every neighborhood, to help them achieve God's unalienable right to pursue happiness. Leadership and freedom depends on courage and integrity. Leadership and freedom believes that honor, duty, and country is not just a motto, but it's a way of life. Leadership also believes, as you know so well, that Place for Life, as we know as Quest Church, as we know at Sunny Lane Baptist Church, where I was a youth pastor, we understand that leadership runs to your citizens after they've made bad choices, not run from this. We in these United States of America must live every day in that tradition. In America, we're at the center of freedom, and she deserves from all of us a commitment to be worthy of that honor. Justice Frederick Douglass asked, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" I ask, what is the Declaration of Independence to the child with no home, no hope, and he or she feels they have no future? The pain our nation feels today from our cultural decline, from the unrest we see, doesn't have to be the agonizing pain of death. Rather, it can be, and it must be, the rejoicing pain of birth, the rebirth of America. Place of a life, you have honored me by allowing me to present to you this morning. I am thrilled and honored, as I said at the outset, that Dustin would extend an invitation to JC and say, "Come and feed our flock." As we celebrate America's independence, let's not waste the pain that we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 months. And it's my prayer that all people of faith from all over the world will be mindful of going before a true and living God on a daily basis and asking the true and living God to bless these United States of America. Thank you very much for letting me be with you by video this morning, and I look forward to seeing you as soon as the dust settles and I'm in San Antonio. I'd love the opportunity to come by and say hello and give you a fist pump. Thank you very much for letting me be with you this morning.